All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a case that is absolutely fascinating, but honestly, it is deeply, profoundly unsettling. We're taking a trip back to a rainy, storm swept Chicago in 1997. We're stepping inside this old, shadowy apartment building where terrifying urban legend was actually born out of genuine police records and unexplained disappearances. The atmosphere in our source material is just thick with thunderclouds and dark streets. It completely sets the stage for a true crime mystery that frankly defies simple logic.
Now, the sheer precision of this phenomenon is what makes it so terrifying. For the residents of this particular Chicago apartment building, the terror ran on a strict schedule. Literally every single Thursday night, the entire building would suffer a complete electrical failure. We're not talking about flickering lights or brownouts here, just an abrupt, absolute blackout. And it happened at exactly 2:13 a.m., lasting for exactly 3 minutes. The exactness of this timing is absolutely crucial because it takes this whole thing out of the realm of, faulty wiring and points to something deliberate, something highly ritualistic. But as our sources point out, the real horror for these residents wasn't the darkness itself. The true terror was what that darkness brought with it. We're looking at the profile of an unidentified entity or suspect, known only as the Blackout Man. This was described as a tall shadow figure, always wearing a dark coat, and his face was perpetually hidden in the dark. He only ever appeared when the power cut out. His modus operandi is bone-chillingly consistent. He used that precise 3-minute window, left inexplicable wet footprints on the ground, and always delivered 3 slow knocks. To truly grasp the scope of this case, we have to look at the sequence of events. Because this wasn't just some campfire ghost story, right? It's a rigorously documented timeline. We start in 1997 with an elderly resident named Martha Collins. Then, a few weeks later, we have the bizarre disappearance of a college student named Daniel Harper. Fast forward a few months, and there's the terrifying elevator encounter of Elena Ruiz. And finally, a grim discovery made by a construction crew in 2008 that essentially tied the whole nightmare together. Okay, so to understand how this suspect operated, we really have to look at the pattern. It all began with Martha Collins. She was this elderly woman sitting in her dimly lit apartment when it happened. The pattern goes exactly like this. Step 1, the complete blackout hits, plunging the flickering yellow lights of the hallway into total pitch black. Step 2, cutting through the silence, 3 slow, heavy knocks on the door. And step 3, which is literally the absolute rule of survival in this building, do not open the door. The physical dread of Martha's encounter is just hard to overstate. When she heard those 3 slow knocks, she crept right up to her peephole and looked out into that pitch-black hallway. Far down at the very end of the corridor, standing perfectly motionless in the dark, was the shadow figure of a man. And the sheer terror of that visual is completely compounded by what the police found the very next morning. There was a trail of strange, wet, barefoot footprints stamped right across the freezing cold floor of the hallway, stopping right outside her door. A few weeks after Martha's encounter, the dynamic in the building shifts. We see the arrival of a young college student named Daniel Harper. Now, Daniel is our skeptic. He moves in with his boxes, a heavy-duty flashlight, and a notebook, entirely unconvinced by all these whispered rumors about a blackout man. He decides he's going to investigate the building himself. He really represents that logical mind trying to make sense of the irrational. It's a brave, albeit incredibly dangerous perspective. I know a lot of us would probably do the exact same thing when trying to rationalize away something that genuinely scares us. But the thing is, skepticism only protects you until the lights actually go out. A Thursday night rolls around, the clock strikes exactly 2:13 a.m., and the entire building drops into absolute darkness. Daniel is sitting alone in his apartment with only the beam of his flashlight cutting through the black. He writes his final, chilling entry in his notebook. He writes, "I hear footsteps outside my door." Shortly after jotting those words down, the door to his apartment slowly opens into the void, and Daniel Harper is never seen again. The way police found the scene only deepened the mystery of it all. Inside Daniel's apartment, everything was completely undisturbed. There was zero sign of a struggle, and bizarrely, his television was actually still running from when the power came back on. But out in the hallway, it told a completely different, terrifying story. The police found those exact same wet footprints we saw in Martha's case. Only this time, the trail led away from Daniel's door, heading directly toward the stairs and vanishing right as they reached the basement.
So the police follow that trail down into the dark, abandoned basement. It's this maze of old pipes and flickering lights, and down there, they made a horrifying discovery. Hidden behind an old, rusted metal door was a secret underground maintenance tunnel. Inside that tunnel, they found a makeshift lair. Our sources list the incredibly disturbing evidence left behind: melted candles, stacks of old newspapers, filthy blankets, and most chillingly of all, walls completely plastered with newspaper clippings of missing people from all across the city.
But it was what was physically scratched deeply into the stone wall of that hidden tunnel that truly paralyzed the investigators. It was just a single sentence, etched into the rock. It read, "The darkness lets him walk." I just want to pause for a second and let the psychological weight of that really sink in. It implies that the blackout wasn't just a convenient cover for this suspect. The darkness was a requirement. It was the very mechanism that allowed this entity to even move. Time moves forward, and the terror just continues. A few months later, a nurse named Elena Ruiz is returning to the building late at night after a shift. She enters the long ground floor corridor, heading toward the elevator. The clock hits exactly 2:13 a.m. The sudden, total blackout drops over the building once again, completely trapping her in the hallway. In the pitch black, standing right near the elevator doors, she sees him, the Blackout Man. His face is entirely distorted by the shadows. Elena absolutely panics. She sprints blindly through the dark hallway, desperately fumbling with her keys, and barely manages to unlock her apartment door. She throws herself inside and locks it tight behind her. She's just standing there, in the pitch black, listening to the total, deafening silence. And then, right on the other side of her door, she hears it. 3 slow knocks. Just like Martha. Just like Daniel. When police arrived later, the hallway was totally empty, but fresh, wet footprints were waiting right outside Elena's door. Over the years, the ongoing dread and all these unexplained strange incidents simply became way too much. One by one, the residents packed up and moved out. The building slowly fell into total ruin. It became completely abandoned, its windows broken, its halls just left to the shadows. But the story didn't actually end there. In 2008, a crew of construction workers went deep into the basement to inspect the infrastructure. And deep inside that same hidden maintenance tunnel, they found something the police had missed years prior. What they found was an old cassette tape recorder completely covered in dust. When they hit play on the tape, the audio painted a picture of absolute nightmare. The recording starts with nothing but the sound of heavy, panicked breathing in a perfectly silent room. And then, a terrified, trembling voice whispers into the microphone, "He's standing outside the door." After that whisper, there's just silence on the tape. Heavy, agonizing silence. And then, echoing from the other side of wherever this victim was hiding, comes the sound. The first loud, deliberate, heavy strike against wood. An agonizing few seconds of dead air pass on the recording. The heavy breathing continues, terrified and ragged. And then, the second bone-chilling knock. The third and final knock strikes the door. And immediately after that heavy thud, the audio completely cuts out. It leaves nothing but the disturbing void of static tape hiss. It's an unresolved, horrific end to whoever was holding that microphone in the dark all those years ago. Which brings us to today. Our sources indicate that even right now, the locals around that abandoned Chicago apartment building tell a very consistent, very creepy story. They claim that on stormy Thursday nights, if you stand outside and watch the building, you will still see exact 3-minute blackouts sweeping across the block. And if you look closely at the broken windows of the upper hallways, you can still see a shadow figure passing through the frame. So it really makes you wonder, is the Blackout Man still walking those halls? We've looked at the timeline, the disturbing evidence in the tunnel, and the terrifying consistency of his pattern. So the one crucial takeaway from this explainer is this. If you ever find yourself alone at night and the power suddenly drops out, plunging you into darkness, and you hear 3 slow knocks echoing from your hallway, remember the rule of the 1997 Chicago apartment. Never ever open the door. But it begs a much darker question. If that building has been completely abandoned for years, whose doors is the Blackout Man knocking on tonight? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your flashlights close.